Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and author of the new best-selling book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. This morning we're meeting with Clint and Penny Bragg, author of Your Marriage, God's Mission, Discovering Your Spiritual Purpose Together. Clint and Penny, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much,
Thanks
Rabbi.
so much.
Now, Hart, since you're dressed so similarly, I want to make sure that we identify Clint and Penny.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Clint.
I'm the one in gray, and he's the one in gray.
Right, yeah, you're the one in gray, he's the one in gray. Okay, that's clear for our audience, especially for those with black and white television, so that should make it very easy for them. Clint and Penny Bragg serve as marriage missionaries through the work of Inverse Ministries, their nonprofit organization. They share their testimony with audiences, teach seminars for couples, and equip ministry leaders across the nation and beyond. Their own story of reconciliation has been featured on multiple national and international television and radio programs. The Braggs are an active part of a nationwide network to strengthen, reconcile, and restore marriages. You can find them at inverseministries.org or follow them on Inverse Ministries on Facebook or on Twitter at 40Day Mission.
That's it.
Clint and Penny, how long have you two been married?
Well, that's always a complicated question.
Yeah, we were married almost 2 years for a while, divorced for 11, and we've been remarried for 15 years now. So you could say 17, but really 15 God's way.
Okay, and no other marriages in between?
Nope, no marriages in between. It's pretty amazing to have those 11 years apart and not to have remarried either one of us.
Exactly.
So in the 2 years, which we will call, do you have a name for the first 2 years?
Nightmare. Actually, the first year.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. We were on the same page. We were actually, kind of leaders in the church where we were at. And we knew how to get people motivated and jazzed and all that good stuff. But we were running ahead of God instead of letting God lead us in what we needed to be doing.
So year one is getting the tickets to the Titanic, getting the brochure, watching the news releases about the launch of this tremendous new vessel, this great cruising experience of a lifetime, and there you two are booked with, you've got a suite booked on the Titanic.
And yes, I'm actually out in front doing that.
There you go.
That scene.
And I'm holding on to her, making sure she doesn't fall over.
Yeah.
But we're having a good time, and then, at the end of our first year, we actually launched off and went on a short-term mission over into Haiti. And we did some amazing work there with a group of people from Minnesota. And but the trouble is there was some spiritual darkness that we weren't really prepared to encounter. And after the trip, I felt a distance growing between Penny and myself. I couldn't figure it out. But we link it back when we really look back at it. There was some spiritual darkness that came in and separated us, and we didn't know how to deal with it.
Well, the moment you said you went on a mission trip to Haiti, the tidal wave coming out of that area, and then after Hurricane Katrina, the after effect of it moving throughout Louisiana into Texas, parts of Georgia, we're seeing the remnant of this darkness beginning to creep into major cities. Houston being incredibly impacted by the overburden of Katrina and much of the fallout from that. So as an outsider, if you were to tell me your story, I would immediately say, well, okay, all right, so spiritual darkness, demonic, what you went there to do. You came across an army that was much better prepared to battle you than you were to battle them.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it's called spiritual maturity. We were, walking with the Lord, but we were infants in Christ, and we really needed to grow, and we weren't I would say we weren't bearing fruit quite as much as we should have been.
I think too, the important thing, and this happens in a lot of couples and maybe some who are watching today, is, you know, the euphoria of marriage, even in the church, you know, can just be so, you know, celebrated and wonderful. And we had this, you know, huge church wedding, but our brokenness as two individuals was not acknowledged. And we did the standard, you know, counseling with the pastor, had a little counselor that downstairs in the church, but we weren't going to talk about the difficult things that happened to us as kids. You know, Clint was over, he spent 2 tours in Vietnam. I had never been out of my little city. I'm raised Italian. He's raised German. I mean, just so many differences that we never addressed. I don't know what we thought. Maybe we were going to be 2 strong people, you know, coming together, then that would make for a strong marriage. But actually that can cause great collision. And so the Titanic struck the iceberg,
you bet,
so to speak.
You know, I'll tell you, the Jewish people get blamed for everything. Iceberg, Goldberg, it's all... it all seems to be thrown in there, and all of a sudden we're to blame for everything. But
that's it.
So you left Haiti. You had been married a year, so now you're early into your 2nd year of marriage, and now you start facing the realities of the pull away, the squaring away, the positioning, the posturing, the what about me?
Yeah,
that's right. I was the first to really take up that posture of distance, because Haiti blew my mind. I saw suffering. I was an immature Christian, and it was the first time I truly encountered how God could allow that type of suffering. Women were handing us their babies and saying, take them back to America. You know, I mean, there was so much that we saw, the voodoo bands there, and boy, all I knew was Clint wanted to do more of that kind of work, and it scared the daylights out of me. And so that was my first kind of push away from him, was not processing our experiences, not having the wisdom to know that what we went through was pretty difficult. We should probably deal with the triggers that all that brought up. And instead, you know, I started to really distance myself physically and emotionally from Clint and from the Lord, just really wrestling with questions of faith. And you know, whenever you do begin to distance yourself, whether it's both of you pushing away or one pushing away, that leaves room for a lot to happen. And I actually opened the door for unfaithfulness, you know, on my part. And we know now, you know, there was a breakdown on both of our sides, but I started to really take an active position of distance. And so as stepping away from the marriage, I had 1 foot out the door and then eventually 2 feet out the door. And Clint was confronting me about that, and I just kept saying, no.
But it took me a while for me to figure out that there was this distance. I felt it, but, you know, I'm saying, okay, it was pretty tough over there. And again, she said, I served time in Vietnam, so I've been in a third world country, and I've been there when devastation's going on and death is going on. And for me, that was, I was able to handle that, but she wasn't. But when I really realized that there was a distance, the gap was so wide. And so when I realized there was someone outside the marriage pulling her away, I tried to do everything I knew how to do, and it wasn't working. I mean, I used the steps of the Bible to go through reconciliation. I mean, I went to my pastor, and I had him come with me and confront her.
Oh, that made me so mad. I was so angry at all of his attempts. You know?
And I got us into counseling together, but she was already out the door. And so, you know, there wasn't nothing wrong with her. It was all me. And I'm trying to say, okay, I'll change whatever needs to be done. But no matter what I did, the harder I tried, the further I pushed her away. And then finally, once she was out the door and once she was gone, I was devastated inside. But I said, okay, I've tried everything I can, Lord. I just have to hang in there. I don't know what to do. And went to divorce. And we lived in the same community for 5 years and never crossed each other's path. In fact, we even went to the same university. She was upper education, I was lower education. Never crossed each other's path. It's unbelievable how God kept us separated. And he had a plan for that, and that's part of why we do what we do.
So during that time, you're now single. Are you with the man that you left him for?
I actually was in a series of different relationships, some longer, some shorter. All of it was just craving that need for intimacy that only God could provide. And so it took me about 8 years of different, things in my life to realize that I really had walked away from my faith and shut that door just the way that I had with Clint. And so I got a good Christian counselor and started that journey back. And it wasn't one of those things where, I'd broken a lot of relationships. Like you mentioned, the hurricanes that come through and the devastation is widespread. Relationships in the church, with my pastor, with him. I didn't want to really deal with him right off the bat. So I started with all those other relationships and, going through the counseling and just going back to people and saying, I just need you to know that I was really dishonest. I'm sorry. I apologize for my part in pulling away. This is what really happened. And so, I did that for a couple years before I got up the courage to finally address my relationship with Clint.
In your analysis, was there an underlying childhood key influencer break in your wholeness, and you were living out brokenness as opposed to living out wholeness?
Absolutely, both of us.
Yeah, I'll share my my part. Is when I was about 9 years old, I was molested for a couple of years as a child. Nobody knew it. My mom would take me to her friend's house, and it was their teenage boy that abused me for a couple of years. And I struggled with that. And then when I finally entered into high school, I became a football player. And on the football field, I used to really hit people hard. And that's the way how I took out my anger out on people and could do it legally, but I became like John Wayne, and I became a lone stranger. In other words, I tried to do what John Wayne did, do the right thing. Always, no matter what the cost, you did the right thing. But at the same time, if you really look at John Wayne, he really didn't have a lot of friends. You didn't see a lot of girlfriends around and all that stuff. That was my life. And so he was my role model. And I was almost 30 years old before I actually accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior.
So on his end, I didn't know all that. I didn't know that about his upbringing. I didn't know how that kind of played into him being a soldier in Vietnam. And for me, I did have some things happen to me when I was a little girl with some neighbor boys, and then a lot of insecurity, my parents' divorce, and some other things that created a pretty needy individual. So as I was looking for him to meet those needs, when that John Wayne, the suck it up pilgrim doesn't work real well with a woman in terms of building emotional connection. So, I kind of got that hardened side of him, then I would pull away. And so our needs were just clashing, I think, in different ways. So to a long answer to your question, yes, living out that brokenness. If we would have understood that we were broken together, right. There's a song out now that says that, Broken Together, that would have been a huge aha for us. Maybe we could have avoided.
An Andy Freeman song. It's one that, terrific song. It says, "Can't we just be broken together?"
Yeah.
Did you find that once you moved it, all these little dark darlings of your heart, from the dark room to the light room, that they didn't become as big, they didn't become as important, and they didn't become defining? They became experiences, not character definers.
Absolutely. And it did take, I think, counseling on both our parts to understand that we could actually live powerfully, victoriously from that place of brokenness without staying in it, and it hadn't been fun to share all those different things, but the more we do put it in the light, it just removes that dark.
And I think that's the whole secret. Once you expose it out there in the open, there's no way that that it can be used against you. So if it's out there and people know about it and you've acknowledged it and if you laid it before the Lord, I'm telling you right now, it frees you up. And the amazing thing, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, somebody wanted us to do a teaching on trust and broken trust. And that's when we decided to expose what happened to us, because we don't shout it from the rooftops. But when we started doing these seminars or these teachings for people, it opened up doors for them, and it was like a switch was flipped, and they could actually go back there, deal with it, give it over to the Lord, and turn their hands over and not receive it back, and it freed them. And so we've been doing for, I guess, about 4 years now.
Specifically on broken trust, because it seems with most people, and again, maybe some of the viewers out there today, it could have been a classmate that broke your trust. It could be parents. It could be sickness, loss, death, tragedy that you went through. And all these things create those fractures. And so marriage, because it requires such intimacy, can take those fractures and just kind of make them greater.
I'm very fond of saying God uses the things of the natural to reveal supernatural truth. And when we are healed at the broken places, it's kind of like welding a piece of steel together. That piece of steel will never break again at the place it was formerly broken, because what the material used to fix it is stronger than the original material.
Amen.
That's right.
So when we allow God to heal us in the broken places, but also remembering that light cannot shine through a perfect vessel. So if I were to drop a candle into this very, very hard, it would extinguish, it would not emanate light. We need to have the fractures, the cracks still allow to shine through, so that we don't hold ourselves out to a standard of perfection, or that, like Paul says, hey, not that I've accomplished all this. So don't be fooled into believing because of my eloquence that I've really done all this. But this I have done. I've forgotten what's behind, and I press on to the mark of the high calling of the prize in Messiah Jesus.
Yes.
So the two of you, you now, Penny, have gotten up the strength to confront, which really, you're either the poster child for 12-step, or either that, or you have 2 Corinthians 5:17 tattooed across your chest. Because there are few people in the world willing to go back. But yet, in Scripture it says, if you bring your gift to the altar and thereby realize someone has something against you,
That's right.
You're instructed to leave your gift and go be reconciled, and then return and offer your gift. Now, in traditional Judaism, we call that the days of awe, the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, as a way of repairing relationships so that we can come with a clean slate for an annual renewal. For a believer in Jesus, that's all been taken care of for me. But that does not mean that there are not a line of body bags behind me of my prior life with lots of toe tags. And, we have a conscience, and yes, God has forgiven, but let's not be confused that our redemption through Christ, our salvation through Christ, redeemed us with the person and healed us with that person. It healed us with God, but that's why there's a cross. There's a horizontal part of our life that we choose whether or not we're going to go back and repair what it is needs to be repaired, so that we take ownership for our part. So, Penny, I have to tell you that not many people do that.
No.
It wasn't real fun. And honestly, I didn't want to, but I had so encountered the mercy and forgiveness of Christ. I mean, I felt like the night that I finally broke open and just confessed to the Lord that I'd sinned against him, that I had done wrong, that I was unfaithful. I mean, I don't know why God picked the night that he picked, but I'll never forget it. Just laid it out before him. And I encountered such mercy and such forgiveness because, wow, there was some ugly, ugly darkness. I mean, we're doing like the PG-13 version right here, but there were other things that I had done that were horrible. And so to receive forgiveness for all that, it just made me so fall in love with God. And it was out of that love and obedience, because I had taken a lot of shortcuts in my life. And this time I didn't want to take shortcuts. And I told the Lord I would do whatever it takes. I was scared. I was really afraid of how people might respond. But the more I did it, the more mercy. You know, there's that proverb that says, he who confesses and renounces sin finds mercy. And I kept experiencing that. Every person I went to, and I said, I just need you to know this is what I did. I apologize if I hurt you. I ask for your forgiveness. And wow, it was so empowering. And Clint should have been the first person at the top of that list, but out of fear, I kept pushing him down to the bottom until there was nobody else left but him. And I told the Lord I would do whatever it took. So at that point in 2002, the internet was up and rolling. You could find people because I didn't know where Clint was.
Right.
And I found him on one of those free people search websites, living 3,000 miles away from me in the state of Florida. And because I found him, I needed to follow through on what I said I would do. So I wrote the most honest letter that I could and sent it off in the mail. That was February of 2002.
Yeah. And before she sent that letter, I want people to know something. I did not want to be divorced from Penny. I tried to do everything I could. And once it happened, I let it alone. I didn't chase her. You know, I'm glad we didn't have social media because I didn't tweet anything. I didn't email anything. I didn't post anything on Facebook to you know, dig a hole for myself. In fact, I zipped my lip and didn't say nothing. In fact, I stayed at the same church for 3 years after we were divorced. And most of the people didn't know we were divorced. And we were the little church darlings. And so anyway, people would always say, aren't you mad at God? The ones that did know, aren't you mad at God? And I'd always say no. But inside, the reason why I said no outwardly was because I knew God could squish me like a bug, and I didn't want to say anything against him. But I'm going to tell you, as the years rolled by, I would think about Penny from time to time, and I would say to God, why did you take her away from me? And inside, I was angry at God. And it took me almost 10 years before I crashed and burned financially and lost everything, before I finally looked up and said to the God, I'm mad at you. And then I turned around and I apologized to him. I said, you didn't play a part in that. I played a part, and it was my fault as much as Penny's. And I said, I'm sorry. And I asked him to help me get out of the mess that I was in. And he didn't just snap his fingers. But I told him, I said, if you'll walk with me and help me out of this mess, I'll do the things I need to do to stay close to you, to follow your ways and all that stuff. Little did I know that he was going to bring her back into my life. And so she writes the letter. I get the letter.
Hold on. We're going to stop right there. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about this miraculous letter and this path to reconciliation that launched Inverse Ministries, which is now helping couples stay married and those who have separated come back together. We're talking with Clint Penny Bragg, Your Marriage, God's Mission, Discovering Your Spiritual Purpose Together. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, We've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Clint and Penny Bragg, author of Your Marriage, God's Mission, Discovering Your Spiritual Purpose Together. Clint and Penny, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So in the first segment, we talked about the recipe for disaster. We talked about an early marriage that had gone astray. Spiritual warfare wedge came between the two of you, isolated you from each other. You then came to grips with your woundedness from childhood, both of you childhood sexual abuse, and found yourselves living apart for 11 years, married for 2, divorced, then apart 11 years, and through a reconciliation mission Penny was on, she was now down to the last person on her list to reconcile with, and sent a letter to Clint. Take us to that day, Clint, that you open the mail and you find addressed a letter from Penny. Do you still go by Bragg at the time?
No, I went by my maiden name.
Well, here's what happened. So God's restoring my life. I come home to go to a second job I had. I had one during the day and one in the evening. So I come home like everybody does, and I go to my mailbox, and I'm walking to the steps of my house, and I got this envelope in my hand. It's a little package, and I look at it, and it says California, and I'm saying, what's my mom sending me? And then as I got to the steps, it said Dublin. I said, I know where Dublin is, but I don't know anybody in Dublin. And when I put the key in the door, it said P.A. Bronzini. That was the love of my life. That was my wife. And I go inside the house, I walk to my office, I set the package down, and I say to God, is this good news or is this bad news? Should I open this up or should I just throw it in the trash? But he led me to open it up, and when I opened it up, it was a letter from her. And it was a letter asking for forgiveness for the way that she walked away from our marriage. I couldn't believe it. I mean, when I opened up the door, my heart literally dropped to my knees and back up to my chest. I mean, she was the love of my life. And so anyway, at the very bottom of the letter, it says, could you either write me a letter or could you give me a phone call? Just let me know that you got this. And I missed the part where she wanted to move on with her life.
Yeah, closure. My intent in writing that letter was not reconciliation in terms of, it was really forgiveness and admitting what I had done. If he wanted to ask me more questions, he could call, and I just wanted to be honest. And then I thought I could just check that off my list.
Yes.
And my list of people would be clear and clean. Little did I know that he would call.
Yeah.
Which I was a little concerned when I heard his voice on my answering machine, because I had not heard that voice in 11 years. And he said he would call back when it was a certain time, my time in California. Yeah. And when he called, I admit I was holding the phone a little bit far away, because I thought, here it is, 11 years. I left him the way that I did. I was unfaithful. I write this letter. He is going to blast me with 11 years of anger, of just sin and everything. So I was really, really cowering as to what was going to happen. And there was this gentleness. There was this kindness on the other end of the phone. He said things like, Penny, I forgave you a long time ago. And I thought, well, I never asked you. How could you forgive me? I mean, I never fessed up and asked for it. And he said, when I encountered the love of God, he shared with me how he had hit bottom. He had $100 to his name.
Yeah.
And when he shared that honesty with me, then it made me want to be more honest with him. It was a 5-hour phone conversation of honesty, brokenness, crying, love, tenderness, mercy. That is not what I expected at all.
So the two of you reconcile and you remarry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what happened was that, when we hung up from the phone call, we pretty much said, hey, have a good life. Yeah. And we went our separate ways. The next morning when I was in my time with the Lord, I was writing and journaling as I was praying. And he led me to write a letter to Penny. And I didn't write letters in those days, and when I finished writing the letter, it was 10 pages long, and there was tears actually coming from my eyes. And at the very end of the letter, I said two things. One, do you know that you were the love of my life? And have you ever thought about reconciliation? And so I just sent that letter off it was a Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock. She got the letter in California. I was in Florida. 2 days. And she called me and says,
reconciliation was not on my radar at all. And when I read that line, have you ever considered reconciliation? I mean, no, because in my mind, who would want me back? Why would he ever want me back after all that? So I called him and just said, Clint, I'm so, what is God doing? You know,
Yeah.
of course, I'm open to whatever the Lord wants. And this began this weekly process on the phone of praying and surrounding ourselves with, this was the very letter that I thought would bring closure to both our lives, just broke it wide open. And isn't that the Lord? He's always taking the wisdom of the world and he's inverting it. That's how we named our ministry Inverse Ministries, because, Jesus said, if you want to be the greatest, you must be the least. And boy, did he turn something upside down that we didn't see coming.
Yeah, and so the 3 months, we, like she said, we talked over the phone once a week and prayed together, but we got accountability around us where we were living to see if this was a warm, fuzzy feeling or if this was God's will. And after 3 months, I finally said to her, I said, you know what? I says, I'd really like to meet you face to face. I want to be able to look you in the eye. I want to see if you're the real deal or not. So I didn't want to go to California because she's got a big Italian family and they kind of get in your business. And so, I said, I want to meet you someplace, but we'll do it above board, have separate rooms and stuff. I said, how about Denver, Colorado? And she agreed.
So that was the first face-to-face meeting. And boy, it was a difficult weekend because we did get more and more honest.
Yeah.
But it was also a real weekend of healing. And, oftentimes the very thing that will heal us, we keep at arm's length because it's too hard. And if anyone's watching and they feel they have a relationship that's just too difficult we just push those things away. But God, he can call the things that are not as though they are. It says in Romans 4:17. And when we do that hard work of healing, yes, it's uncomfortable. Oh, it was so uncomfortable, but it was so well worth it. And we did get engaged at the end of that weekend, and we did remarry, and now we have been remarried almost 16 years.
So out of this came Inverse Ministries, which is your marriage ministry, and you hold workshops for churches and communities, and also do some couples counseling as well. And you've learned from this experience, the baby that you birthed was a marriage mission, that if you attack marriage the way you attack missions, which is with great planning, with resource identification, with responsibility identification, with contingency plans and communication plans, that your marriage can survive and even thrive, even in the broken places.
Yeah. Exactly. And what I think everything that you just described, we call it intentionality. You have to be intentional about your relationship with God. You have to be intentional about your marriage. And one of the things that we identify is that men are not stepping up to their role of spiritual leadership in the home. And I'm a first generation Christian. And so I didn't have the role model to show me what a man's supposed to do in his household and how he's supposed to serve God and serve his family. And being the spiritual leader doesn't mean you're the authority. It means that you love your wife, your children, but you love God first. And the thing is that you serve. You give your time to those people. And a lot of guys don't understand that. And I said, that's the thing that's driving a wedge in your marriage, is you're putting them last instead of first.
So through the book, you have created a weekly guide for couples to navigate through the book various stages. Phase 1 of induction and mission ops, why marriage requires a mission, into basic training, planning and protocols, hazards and hostilities, and then checkpoints and charges. But all throughout this, you create a framework for people to have support, to build a support system, to have a place to err safely. Talk to me about a concept that's been bandied around that I've never really been able to grasp and define, is how to fight fair, conflict resolution. How do you deal with anger moments or disappointment moments, expectation moments? Because in my experience at 66 years old, have been married before, is that when expectation is not met, the person is fully engaged in disappointment.
Yes.
It's not a part of them that's disappointed. I become a disappointed person. It's not that I'm disappointed in that action or that result. I myself would describe myself, I am so disappointed. And so we're dealing with this area of expectation, and whether or not it was set by God, set by man, or falsely set, or implied, or expected, or imposed. How do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, really, we go back to the root of each spouse's individual relationship with God, because it's out of that individual intimacy, realizing that God's the only one that can meet our needs, and He's the only one that can meet every expectation, and all of that. And a lot of couples will say, well, why do you want to talk to me about that? Why do you want to talk to me about my personal relationship with God? This is a marriage issue. But it really goes back to the individual relationship with God that helps us create a culture in our marriage to have difficult conversations. The conflict's always going to be there. I mean, we still have conflict, and we still have difficulties. We went, as a family, we went through a great tragedy in our family, and that reverberated with years of grief and sorrow, and we grieved in two completely different ways. It was some of the most difficult years of our remarriage together. We had to have a culture already putting into place. How do we talk about these hard things? You know, can we do it without somebody bailing out and walking out of the room? Can we do it without levels of anger, rising when there's a heated discussion on the table? And it's really been a process of getting with God individually and asking Him to make us, mold us, shape us individually, so that we can learn together to do what we call courageous conversations. In our first book, Marriage on the Mend, we talk about establishing that culture of being able to talk about things that are really hard to talk about, especially when emotions are high, like you said, like there's anger and expectation and the realization that we are not going to meet each other's needs.
Yeah, and we're definitely not the same. In other words, Penny can think on her feet and she'd give an answer right now. I need to process. You give me something that I'm not familiar with, or a conflict, I'm not going to sit there and try and compete with you and give you the answer that you want. So the individual times that we have every single day with God, I take these things to God and say, okay, show me what I need to do. Where am I in the wrong? Am I right? And even if I am right, show me how to do these things. And it's really amazing. He points me to some scripture, or he just gives me this peace inside myself. And the thing about it is, because she's in her quiet time asking the same questions, when we come together, now there's not this wall or this division or this competition that I'm right, you're wrong. We don't have those things. We say, okay, how can we make this work so it's doable for both of us? And I think that's the big thing. Everybody thinks in a marriage that it's either someone's right and someone's wrong. No, it's not. It's a new standard that God's putting in your marriage, and you have to figure out what is it He's trying to do, so because He's giving you that experience so you can share it with somebody else and help them get through their moments.
Based on the number of couples you have encountered, including yourselves in this and your various relationships, what would you consider to be the top 3 issues that are chronic and have to be dealt with. They seem to be the cancer, the heart disease, and the lung disease of marriage.
The first would be not ever exposing the brokenness of childhood, because everything else stems out of that.
Yeah.
And so there are always secrets, things that we keep that we don't want to talk about or share, and holding those things secret would be number one. I think number two is unforgiveness. Pride and unforgiveness kind of work together. If you're too proud to ask someone, like, I'm sorry, I really messed up. Can you forgive me? And I got angry with you and I apologize for that. That struggle between pride and unforgiveness, I think, would definitely be the second one. And then you could probably backfill the third one in with all the things that are vying for our attention, like money and
finances and communication and
porn.
Yeah.
All that stuff. It just
there's lots of different addictions. It could be pornography, or it could be involved in sports, or it could be just I've got to go a million different places when you really don't need to be all those different places. So people are looking for escape routes, I guess, if you want to call it that, to make themselves happy. And the more they do it, the less peace, the less happiness that they really have, because no matter how much they do of those other things, they are never fulfilled.
Satisfied.
In my years of counseling as a congregational leader, I would ask two questions. One, would you rather be right or be happy? And the second one was, here's a test for you. Whatever this difficulty is, will it matter in a week? Will it matter in a month? Will it matter in 6 months? Will it matter in a year? Mm-hmm. And when taking a position, well, we have to do it this way, if it's not going to matter in a month, what difference does it make?
Amen.
We major on the minors. It is not the mountaintop. Life is in the valley. It's not on the mountaintop. The mountaintop can't support life. So your advice to couples who are in the marital rut, their marriage hasn't changed in 25 years. Mm-hmm. Intimacy is it's like either on demand or non-existent. They've drifted into a comfort level where he lives his life, they live their life, they have dinner together, they go to church together, but they really are not one with a cord of 3 strands. Mm. And we just have a couple of minutes left in the segment, what would you say to them?
It doesn't have to be mediocre. God's plan for this covenant is so much more than we imagine. And when we let it get to settle down to that point where we're on parallel tracks together, again, it's usually an individual intimacy issue with the Lord, but there are so many couples like that. That's the perfect scenario. I mean, we see that scenario time and time again, but God really does have a purpose for why he's called you together. We didn't catch that the first time around. Mm-hmm. Oh, the purpose was my happiness and your happiness and the house and the kid, and all that kind of stuff. But the purpose is God ordained. Missions are run throughout the Bible. And so there's a reason he's called you together. But if you never pursue him and ask him, what is that mission, and begin to let him take those two parallel. We have a great friend, Joe Williams. He always says the natural direction of a marriage is to separate. And it's true, but the supernatural direction of a marriage is to join together and to be in that Godward direction.
And to be a spear and not a net.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what services does Inverse Ministries provide?
That is a great question. Well, we do operate as marriage missionaries, so we go out to people in our van, oftentimes during the year. Sometimes we'll fly from places that are too far from us, and we offer the real story. Yeah. We rip kind of the layers back, and we do that by example. They're sharing our story, giving people the opportunity to have prayer ministry. to receive God's healing and to peel back some of their layers. And then we work with churches also to implement ministries of reconciliation, because oftentimes a church will have men's ministry, women's ministry, maybe some date nights. But what happens when the marriage blows apart? Is there an active ministry of reconciliation? So that's another service. Our books and resources, we help couples to begin to take those first important steps together and then get them plugged in with resources in their community as well. So it's kind of a variety of things. And then teaching, workshops, and seminars also.
And I try, in our community, I try to do discipleship with men and try and teach them how to be spiritual leaders and point them to what God says we should be doing. So just things like that. We do this. We aren't packed minute by minute. We put margin in our schedule so that when God sends his divine appointments, that we don't hesitate. We drop what we're doing and we can do that, and we're not having the domino effect where everything else falls apart. So we've been very blessed.
So in addition to Inverse Ministries, which you can find at inverseministries.org, you can get a copy of Marriage on the Mend, Healing Your Relationship After Crisis, Separation, or Divorce, which is kind of your testimony story of surviving the Titanic. And then your new book, Your Marriage, God's Mission, Discovering Your Spiritual Purpose Together. So whether or not you're pre-marriage, great book to lay as a foundation of how we're going to operate in our marriage and how to navigate dialogue early on the good, the bad, and the ugly, and to journey together back to 3, 4, 5-year-old children and what it was like to see where you've carried that into your existing relationship. But for those who are in that marital rut, which seems to be most of the marriages that I know, there is hope for renewal, for revival, and for reconciliation with God as the one to be the great reconciler, to help you find that passion, both physical, spiritual, emotional, and bring healing, which love happens to be the single greatest healer in the Bible. The fact that there is such a diagnosis as broken heart syndrome tells you that the heart is the center of, that's why there's no Hebrew word for brain, because all thought takes place in the heart. And this speaks right to the heart. So Clint and Penny Bragg, thank you for being with us and sharing Inverse Ministries and your new book, Your Marriage, God's Mission, Discovering Your Spiritual Purpose Together. A great gift, husband to wife, wife to husband, parents to their young married children, parents to their children who are contemplating marriage, or even a great foundational small group for married couples to work through together, where you can build accountability that in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, have it last you through your 50s, 60s, and 70s, and have them grow with you as you grow together.
Amen.
Clint and Penny, thank you so much for sharing your story with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you so much.
God bless.
Yes.
God bless you, and Merry Christmas. And
Merry Christmas.
that brings to an end our live broadcast day, but that does not mean we go off the air. We broadcast here at the Igniting Nation Broadcasting Network 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This episode, along with all the prior episodes from today's program, will replay every hour on the hour until this time, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, when we're back here live in the studio to bring you tomorrow's programming. Until we see you here or on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, or on our partner network, WND TV, we bid you shalom.